Hello, hi, welcome everybody. I'm Mayri Perez Turmero. I'm the Outreach and Program Librarian here at the Portsmouth Library. And I'd like to begin tonight with our land acknowledgement. The city of Portsmouth is on the homelands of the Abenaki people, who have ongoing cultural and spiritual connection to this area. According to the tribal oral tradition, Abenaki people have lived in the place now called New Hampshire for more than 12,000 years, since before tribal memory. The Abenaki are part of a larger group of indigenous people who call themselves Wabanaki, or people of the dawn, and form many communities connected by a common language family. Here at the Portsmouth Public Library, we're committed to acknowledging and honoring the human history tied to this land. So before we start, I have just a few housekeeping items to go through. First, if you haven't, please silence your phone before we start. Thank you. If you need the restrooms, there will be past the hallway to the left and through the doors on the left. In the unlikely event that we need to exit quickly, I'm going to do the flight attendance part. We have two exits, one on my right, one on my left, and then one you came through. Please do not go on that door on the back because it will lead you to the children's department. That's not what you like to go. For those of you who are joining us online, we'll turn on the subtitles for this event. If you prefer not to see them, just select high subtitle at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll bring them up to Greg at the end. We'll be here until 5 p.m. today, but we have plenty of other programs happening every week, so don't forget to grab on the way out our program for March calendar, and if you so would like, our event feedback form. We really appreciate how you found today's program and what you'd like to see in the future. Finally, I'll give you, and I know you're all started and eager to start, a dedicated advocate for Greenland's unique culture and people, and their people, Greg Smith.
Thank you very much. I haven't even done anything yet. This is great. Good afternoon. I very much appreciate you coming out. This is a shared experience. You'll find that I've been to a number of places around the world. This just happens to be one of the most delightful of all those places. I like to begin by telling people that I'm actually a traveler. And by the time I was 5, I could reach the doorknob, and I've been gone ever since. Been to pretty much every continent in the world and to a lot of different places. I lived and worked in Africa with my wife and 2 kids in the Kingdom of Lesotho in Southern Africa. I've been into many different places in South America and every place in North America, including Greenland, which is actually technically part of North America. So these are all fun things. I've spent 10 years traveling with photographers. I am a photographer and a writer, and it's been probably one of the high points of my life before COVID shut us down, that we were traveling mostly in the Western US from the Rocky Mountains to the sea, and from Canada. You know, we snuck over the border occasionally too. And then into Mexico, we didn't at the same time because it's a different country to say the least. But we got to northern Italy, and we got to Ireland and England, and eventually Madagascar. And I spent 5 weeks with one client driving 4,000 miles around the island of Madagascar, which has to be some kind of new record if you know Madagascar, the land of the lemur and all the rest of those. But over time, I've really gained a fondness for the poles. I've been down to Antarctica, and I've slept out in the snow, just myself and 15 or 20 other crazy people on an expedition down there. No tent, just the ice and me. And that was fun, really. And I've also been to Alaska chasing blue ice. Blue ice to me is just fascinating. As a photographer, and I don't know, I guess just an aesthete, as they say, along the way. I've been to Newfoundland, been to Iceland in a pop-up camper, and went all around the island there. And coming and going from Europe, I flew over this place, Greenland. And a few times when there wasn't any clouds and you could look down, I was absolutely fascinated with the formations of ice, because this is really, truly a unique place in the North continent, in the Northern Hemisphere. So that's what kind of got me started. A year ago, because I have traveled as much as I have, I worked for 5 years on the Navajo reservation, setting up a vocational training school and building panelized housing, just myself and a whole lot of Navajo folks. Okay, and I've traveled from all the way from Florida to Alaska on kind of an expedition, actually, to talk to Native American groups, tribes, as we would say, about economic development. So I know about that. That's what took me to Africa. I've worked in Gaza, yes, 30 years ago on USAID. I was training civil engineers, Palestinian civil engineers, in project management and project development at the time. I've worked on the West Bank for the World Bank, doing things related, of all things, to tourism. It's impossible anymore, but at the time, it was pretty neat to try to work in that capacity too. So I get around and I have a special feeling for Native peoples any place in the world. And so when I heard about Greenland and the situation they were in, I decided that I needed to dig in. I needed a new project, and this was it. So I spent the better part of 6 months, because I am a researcher along with writing, and was fascinated with what I learned about Greenland at the time. And so this kind of led me to, I got to go there. And so I did. And I spent 18 days on the island along the way. And that was fascinating. And then I decided, okay, there's 2 things I can do. And this is what I'm introducing you folks to hopefully in the future. You'll come to our website. It's not a billboard for Greenland. It's actually an educational source. And we keep adding to it so that you can go to it and get connections to the rest of the world. We do have a nonprofit, and our nonprofit is educational. That's our intent. So then after we got that thing up and running, then I decided that one of the best things I could do is actually go out. Ma'am, there's a seat down here if you'd like. One of the things that I could do is do live presentations about Greenland and have you folks pass it along to as many people as you know. And then later this year, I will be in phase 3 along with the live presentations, and that's developing educational media modules, okay, K through 12, mostly about the climate. Climate change is huge for Greenland. And Greenland is affecting other parts of the world. You probably heard about the oceans rising slowly along the way, but they're melting at 3 times the rate that everyone else is warming up. And that does affect us too. So these are things that have been kind of set aside. And what I want to do with time, with these modules, which I have an advanced degree in making those and have done that for a lot of different organizations over time, is to share them, mostly with American kids, but yes, Canadian kids and European kids ultimately at the same time. So that's where I am. And by the end of this year, I hope to be going back every 6 months or so to Greenland, talking with folks in the fields of science. It's something that I know a fair amount about myself, and taking lots of pictures. Because as a photographer, you can never have too many pictures, no matter what you do. So this is exploring Greenland in pictures mostly, but there's a lot to be learned from there too. Oh, are we allowed to do this? Okay. We're working on it. Yeah, here it is. Okay, good. Thank you. This is the flag of Greenland. It seems awfully simplistic, but it's actually, it won a contest. That's where this came from, with people in Greenland, something that would represent them. The white is obviously the 80% of the country that's frozen. The red are the people, and not because they're Native American, but because they're warm. So this was, if you go to the site, you can actually find the story behind how this flag came to be. It's kind of neat in that regard. It's vast. It has a cultural heritage. They're Inuit peoples. Depending on who you read, about 90% of all the people that live on Greenland are Inuit. Okay, now Inuits, if you do the history, they are the end of a migration. If you go backwards, then you'll see Inuits in Canada and Inuits in Alaska and Inuits in Siberia, and that's more or less where they came from over time. About 4,500 years ago, that's when the first migration came to Greenland. Now, where is it? We keep hearing this stuff in the news. It's huge, it's over there, it's over here. This is where it is, actually. If you go directly above it, that's the North Pole. It's the most northern of all land masses in the entire Arctic is actually Greenland. It's not Canada, it's not Russia, it's not Alaska, it's actually Greenland. And it ain't green, as somebody will tell you in a minute. It's all a whole lot of white. So about 80% of it is covered with an ice sheet, and the other 20% is granite. So that's kind of hard to take too.
Some people say, when you've seen the world, there's always Greenland. But in reality, this place is very different from what its name might lead you to believe. First, it's not really green. Second, it's more than just land. Wildlife is at its wildest. Ice comes in all shapes and sizes.
And there it is. That's what it actually looks like from space. You will, as you look at this, you may as well know going in, the island to the right is Iceland, all right? And then the big island is Greenland. And in Greenland, you'll see there's an awful lot of ice sheet far south of Iceland. And this to me is still a bit of a mystery. I have to talk with more scientists than I have as to why this thing keeps getting snowed over. It has 5 times it's melted and become green in 150 or 200 million years. So it's a puzzle, mostly because Iceland, which is one of the newest parts of the entire surface of the Earth, hasn't gotten to that point yet. And it's actually warmed up by the currents that come up from the Gulf Stream more than Greenland is. Now, as you look at this, the green part on the left side is the west, what they call the West Coast. 85% of all the people that live in Greenland live in that strip of green on the west side. It's milder, it's open. Then there's most of the rest of the people live actually down at the far southern part, and very few live on the East Coast. Only around 3,000 people in a coastline that's 1,600 miles long, and they're in 2 villages. So needless to say, you're by yourself if that's where you go. Superlatives. This is one place in the world that can claim probably more superlatives than any place else. Greenland is the largest island in the world. You think of Australia, sounds like an island, it's not. It's actually a tectonic plate all unto itself, so it is actually a continent. This, that is to say Greenland, is part of the North American plate, okay? And that's why it's not considered to be an independent part of the world. It's a flotsam part of North America. And many of the other places in the world that we think of as islands or not islands, this is the thing that separates them. Antarctica is a continent because it too has its own plate. That's the distinction in geography as to what it does. It's the largest ice sheet in the Northern Hemisphere. Kalalit Nunaat has the lowest population density of any country. That's the Inuit word for Greenland. Scoresby is the largest and longest fjord system in the world. If you think of fjords, you usually think of Norway as an example. These, these fjords can go 150 miles into the country, and by then you're in Sweden. If you were some kind of fjord in Norway, they're enormous by comparison. Greenland has two of the fastest moving glaciers in the world. The fastest one, Jakobshavn Isbrae. I've been there to the edge of that in the Ilulissat. And this is probably back in 1912 or 14, I can't remember when. I think it was 12 when the Titanic sank. That is probably the glacier that had calved an iceberg that found its way down, because they do. I mean, it's the greatest producer of icebergs any place in that part of the world that found its way down and discovered the Titanic. And then the largest national park in the world is the Northeast Greenland National Park. It represents 25% more or less of this enormous island at the same time. This is what Greenland looks like when there ain't no ice. It actually has been, they've used radar over a long period of time, just down-looking radar, and have shot through the ice sheet as it is. It has a huge inland sea on this. This is what it would have looked like 410,000 years ago, the last time that it didn't have ice on it. The land to the left is kind of like a Piedmont, and then where you see the dark colors on the right, those are mountains. Some of them are 10, 12,000 feet high. So it does give you some perspective. What I like is when they poke up through the ice sheet and all you see is the peak of the, anyway, it's a crazy thing for photographers. This is what it looks like in comparison to the lower 48. It goes pretty much from Brownsville up to the North Woods in Minnesota if you were to layer it that way. So it's 3 times the size of Texas and 1.5 times the size of Alaska, if that means anything to you. At the same time.
Did you know that Greenland is the world's largest island? Despite its massive size, it's not classified as a continent, earning it a unique spot in our planet's geography. You could think of it as the Antarctica of the North, but there's a big difference. While Antarctica is a vast ice-covered landmass, Greenland is an island surrounded by the Arctic Ocean with the cold and isolation to match.
But you knew that already because I told you that. So, when you fly over Greenland, this is the kind of perspective on the East Coast you might get. And as a photographer, this is outrageous. I didn't take these pictures, someone else did. I've never seen it quite like that in flying over, but this is incredible. It's just beautiful. And this one always makes me think of Mars. I did a great deal of research for a book that I wrote about 4 years ago called The Seam of Creation. And one of the things that I looked into in great depth is the surface of Mars. In NASA pictures and whatever hundreds and hundreds of pictures that I looked at, one of the things I found, is that there is snow, that is to say ice, on Mars. And the rest of it is just sand dunes that create some of the most beautiful landscapes you have ever seen. And behind it all is red rock. And so this actually is not Mars, but it does remind one a lot of that same kind of landscape. 1,000 years of dog sledding. Now, dog sledding is not brand new anywhere in the world. In fact, it's a lot older than 1,000 years. But the last 1,000 years have seen the folks, the Inuits, using dog sledding on Greenland, okay? And they have developed these guys. This is a very purebred dog. For the last 150, 200 years, no dogs have been allowed to be imported to Greenland. They took what they had and they kept breeding them, and they've come up with this amazing breed of dogs, and they won't allow any tainting along the way. If you've been to Iceland, you may have seen the ponies there. It's the same situation as Iceland. Iceland will not allow any horses of any kind or description on Iceland. And it's for the same reason, to maintain the purity of what they've got. These guys are not usually allowed to mess with tourists because they're kind of half wild all the while, but these folks were lucky. Now, this is one of those unusual situations. If I said dog sledding to us in New Hampshire or Arizona or any place else, you would think of 2x, okay? That's the way in North America, in the lower North America, that they run dog sleds, okay? Why? If these folks are running them in a pack that's kind of fans out, why do we do 2x2? Mostly because there's trees in North America. And so when we're following a trail, you don't want a bunch of, I can't even imagine what it would be like to try to run these guys through a bunch of trees. It just wouldn't work. There's absolutely no trees. So they can, for whatever reason, they came up with this kind of random fanning of the dogs. And I think that's probably why they did what they did. This is part of the East Coast, which is surprising because it's definitely winter with all that snow, but it didn't freeze. And it does freeze on the East Coast, not on the West Coast so much, definitely not anymore. In the last 20 years, places that used to be able to drive a car 20 miles from the mainland to Disco Island, they don't take dogs, they don't take anything because the ocean is now open in places where it didn't used to be. Summer is tough on dogs. I was there in late August, early September, and they're not happy campers. There's nothing for them to do particularly, and people don't take the greatest care, frankly, of dogs without something. They're really happy when it starts to snow. This is a brief history of Greenland culture. There's an awful lot there, but this will give you at least a taste of it. This is what happens when somebody visits a place and then they go back and tell an artist to draw a picture of it. It's kind of like you telling the story to somebody and then they tell the, you know how that works. By the time it's the third or fourth person, it doesn't even look like the same story. Well, this is close, but there's a couple things. First of all, they don't sit in a barrel in the middle of a kayak. I've never seen one at any age that looks like that. But two things you need to notice. One is they're using atlatls. For those of you who ever have looked at older cultures and whatever, an atlatl is used with a spear. And what it is it's a throwing device to make the spear go farther and faster. And they've adopted it, but it's been adopted around the world. It's not an uncommon thing among older cultures. And the other thing is behind this guy is a bladder. It's part of probably a seal or whatever, and it acts as a balloon. And if he were to spear the seal that you see in the corner there, the seal will take off and dive. That's its defense, as you can imagine, even with a harpoon in it. And so that bladder goes overboard with the line that's connected to the harpoon and eventually tires out the seal, and the seal comes back to the surface and can be pulled in to the boat. This is a 1920s picture, actual photograph of that same situation. Mind you, these are not made in a factory. These are made in the field. And the structure of these kayaks, just like the umiaks I'll show you in a minute, all come from driftwood and whalebone. Those are the structural members of what's going on there. And in addition to that, then they're covered with various kinds of seal skins and whatever. And they're silent. This is one of the things that I was told by a couple of Inuits that I ran into. If you have a plastic or a fiberglass kayak and you're going through the water, it always makes noise. But when you have one that's made out of seal skin and it's actually gliding through the water, it's almost silent. Pretty interesting, I think, idea. This is an umiak. It's kind of like a moving van, as it were. It's not for hunting, although sometimes they use them for whales. It's mostly for moving from hunting grounds to other parts of where they're going, summer to winter, winter to summer. Some of these historically have been as long as 60 feet. Now that is a lot of skins, not to mention a lot of whalebone and a lot of driftwood to put these things together. But it's just kind of a hulking big thing that has to go from here to there. It's not intended to be primarily a hunting device. They don't have glasses, but they did invent this. And I don't know if you've ever seen these. I did when I was a kid in history books. These are slits, and what they do, they're all carved out of bone, not wood, and they put them over their eyes, and the idea is to keep them from going snowblind. So they have just a slit of enough light entering their eyes so they can see it without being blinded at the same time. And they've been doing this for 1,000 years. I mean, it's their innovation. This lady is one of my favorite people in all of Greenland, Inga Bisgaard. She is an architect as well as an anthropologist, and she's been all over the island studying for 4,500 years, as long as there have been Inuits, building very basic housing and whatever. She's drawn it and taken pictures of it, and she is now an internationally recognized person in that field. And I was very fortunate, because I worked in construction for 25 years in housing, to sit down and talk with her, and I still communicate with her as we go along. This is a very old, but not too old, maybe 1,000-year-old foundation for a house. Now, what they did is they built the foundation by this time out of stone. Before that, it was just whalebone. And then they would put a structure up above it, and it would be almost like building a Quonset hut, if you will, but again, out of whalebone and driftwood. And then they'd cover it with skins during the winter. Then in the summer, they would take it all off and air it out, sanitize it, and move to their hunting grounds someplace else. This is a more ancient one. Those are all whale bones that you see there. So they started almost from the ground up with the whale bones. That's tough stuff to build a structure out of that you got to live in for 8 months or whatever along the way. Igloos, you've all heard of them. Igloos are usually associated with Eskimos. Do not call the Inuit Eskimos. That is a pejorative in every sense. For whatever reason, they just don't want to be associated with that term. These were not long-term housing. They were like bivouacs. When they would be going from point A to point B, this is what they would put up before they built over the roof of their summer hunting housing, or the other way around in winter. These are tupelaks, and tupelaks have a history too. Not everybody got along in Greenland over the last 4,000 years. People encroached on somebody else's hunting ground and all that sort of thing. So when you have had it with your neighbor and they won't listen, they carve one of these things and leave it out on the ground, but kind of semi-hidden near the family that lives next door, so to speak. And then they put a curse on it. And that's the whole idea of a tupelak. It is literally a cursed object, and it's supposed to bring pretty bad things to your neighbors. We don't do it anymore. They don't do it anymore, but they do carve them and sell them to people as memories. The people on the left, it's about 1920. That is just folks who still lived out in the communities, way out beyond the towns and the city of Nuuk. But that's what they dressed like and what their local raiment looked like. These are modern versions of tupelaks. I have a little one. It's probably 6 inches high. It's made out of antler. You could also make them out of whalebone, or you can make them out of walrus tusk. And those are legal to export, but they're pretty. This is one of the more involved ones. I've seen them as much as 18 inches long that must have taken them 3 to 4 months to carve. They're so incredible, but those again are today and they're mostly decoration. This is a big colonial house that was in Ilulissat, where I was for a week, and they took it over as a museum. And the museums there are top notch. They will compare to anything you can find here or in Europe at the same time. Fascinating places, and they do bring, they're very, very proud of their heritage, Inuits in particular, and they really have a hard spot when somebody decides that they don't matter or whatever, including the Danes early on. They had a problem with that too, not now, but they did that. These are traditional raiments. Again, this is outdoor wear. You see the lady on the right has dungarees on. This is not, or do we call them blue jeans? At the same time, it's not something that you would see in downtown Nuuk, but it is still being worn even now for lucky people that have those kinds of skins. And to make those, and you can see every time there's a color change, it's probably another band of another kind of animal. The colonial period started more or less in 1728, when the Danes finally decided that they were going to settle there, and they've been there consistently ever since. This is kind of looks like Sturbridge Village in Massachusetts or Connecticut, wherever that is. I used to know when I lived here 100 years ago. This is the same sort of thing that you will find in the edge of Nuuk. Their capital is this collection of colonial houses, beginning again in around 1728 forward. Oops, sorry. This is the edge of that, and it's all preserved. It's all just like Sturbridge Village. It's something they kind of have a joint interest in, both the Danes and the Greenlanders, in preserving this. Then the green one is much newer. That's probably 70 years old. And then what you see beyond that is a very modern building, which you will see later in my walkabout in Nuuk. This is a church that's just turning 250 years old in Ilulissat, still being used. It's part of the community. These folks, this is the way they dress daily. It's, again, a community that's rather isolated in the southern part of Greenland. And again, skins primarily, except for that one lady who has what is traditionally one of the most beautiful kinds of clothing that you can find in the world. It's beadwork. And I was just told by someone who'd spent more time in Greenland than I have, talking to the Inuits, those typically, when you get a dress in a combination like that, are actually handed down from one generation to another when there's a wedding. So the mother hands it to the daughter-in-law or the daughter, or whatever, and so it goes for some period of time. The amount of time, I can't even tell you how long it takes to make one of those. But the rest of that is everyday clothing. And I can't do this without icebergs. This is not mine. I wish it was. This is a young woman who took this picture, Bonnie Moreland, on the east coast of Greenland. This is mine. It's just a very complicated iceberg with a lot of things going on. So is that. What I love is what's underneath the water. When you see that bluish green and you can look down on it underwater, it's fascinating. This is another gentleman. This is early in the season. This might be early June when there's still snow on everything. They haven't rolled and a lot of the bridges haven't collapsed. That's the sort of thing you see. When I was there, these are some of the icebergs coming out of that glacier that I told you about before. It's actually a United Nations World Heritage Site. And what you see in the foreground are lichens and all sorts of different low-lying plants that are turning. And it's all sorts of beautiful colors along the way. And then one more iceberg picture. Wildlife. I think this probably would surprise a lot of you. It sure surprised me. There are more or less 6,500 species of mammals in the world. We're always discovering more. It went from 4,000 about 25 years ago to 6,500 now. A lot of those are very small, mind you, but only 7 of them live in Greenland. On the other hand, there are 240 species of birds and 850 species of insects. Who counted those? But the other thing that I was curious about is Greenland has insects and spiders, and sure it does, because it's not nearly, parts of it are not nearly as tough on the environment as you might think. And so they have been, over time, coming in, things blow in on the wind, as you know, and so they arrive there, and then 75 species of spiders. That's wild. Some 16 species of whales live off the coast. Whales are a big deal up there. If you've been to Antarctica or read about it, especially the different species of whales that are there make their way all the way to the Arctic. That's a big haul for anybody, about 8,500 miles to get to the other part. And there are 250 species of fish, which is what's kept the Inuit alive for 4,500 years. They are fishermen, fisher people, whatever. But on the seafloor, there are at least 2 coral reefs and many seabeds with over 2,000 species of marine animals and plants, by the way, at the same time. That's amazing. Did you know that there were coral reefs in the Arctic? You really have to dig to find some of this stuff. It turns out a lot of this is very competitive with the Caribbean. The Caribbean's waters, because they're warm, have less oxygen than the ones in the north. And there are all these 2,000 species, and that's just what they've counted so far, that live in oxygen-rich environments that can be a degree above freezing or 3 degrees above freezing, but they love it. So that's where you find these unusual collections of animals.
Greenland is home to a surprising array of wildlife. It's home to narwhals, the unicorns of the sea, and Greenland sharks, the longest living vertebrates on Earth with lifespans of up to 500 years. Polar bears are spotted drifting on icebergs, and rare polar bear twins are often born in this icy realm.
That little guy in the back.
Remarkably, fossil evidence shows that Greenland was once covered in lush forests, a far cry from the icy landscape we see today. With some of the cleanest air on the planet, free from pollution, Greenland truly stands as a pristine natural sanctuary.
That one always gets me too. Polar bears. I don't know if you knew this, but they're marine mammals. They are not land mammals. Why? Because 90% of everything they eat comes from the sea, and they have to go out on the sea, so to speak, in flotsam in order to get it. Those are seals along the way. Yes, it surprised me too. This is one with a seal in a typical float, especially on the east coast of Greenland along the way. And they are pretty amazing. This is a head count of, as close as we've got to date, of polar bears. About 4,000 of them live on Greenland, and that's about a fourth of the 16,000 in the world. Of those, the places where you see the red, that is where they're in decline. The one place where they're not is the yellow, and that's the Western Hudson Bay area where they're actually increasing. And then the green is more or less stasis, where they're not going up or down. The rest of it, all those gray areas, they don't have a really good count, and they don't know exactly how many polar bears are still running around. So that's the Arctic. And no, they don't occur in Antarctica. And no, there aren't any penguins in the Arctic. Well, anyway, you get the idea. Some things live north and some live south, and most of them don't live there. You gotta look at this guy, or lady, as it turns out. The Greenland shark lifespan of 250 to 500 years. Sexual maturity, 100 years, okay? Gestation, 8 to 18, not months, years. Kid you not. I've read it in too many places. And pups is anywhere from 10 to 200 pups. Well, I mean, what the heck? After 18 years, you're bound to have more than one. So they are still studying these particular creatures because they don't know enough about them so far. These are some of the statistics that they've come up with. They live between 300 feet down and 4,000 feet down. Now, it's mighty dark down there. And again, if you want to know more, look them up. They are fascinating critters. And yes, they are the longest lived sharks in their case that are in the world. They're also one of the biggest. They're 20 feet long at their longest, and they weigh 2,500 pounds, but it takes them a long time to get there, as you can imagine. Narwhals, you've run across narwhals or seen these unicorns of the sea, so to speak. These are all males. Males are the ones with the spire that comes out. That is a canine tooth. That's where it originates, in the jaw of males. And sometimes they say there's two, but I think they're more of a freak than they are something regular. Females almost never have those spires, but they too are not threatened, which is pretty interesting. They haven't been hunted in modern times like so many others. And in Canada and Greenland in particular, they're still running around in large numbers. This guy is my favorite, along with red-winged blackbirds. Back in the day, that was a long time ago, when I used to color before I got a camera, I used to love to color muskox. And this isn't an ox. I don't know if you knew that. I didn't. It's more of a goat, actually. And they are really, really interesting animals, and they're no wild beasts. If you see them even in the wild and you're not hunting them, you can sometimes get them to come not too far from where you are. And then trophy hunters shoot them anyway. But I liked them as a photographer because you could get that close. And there's something about them that's just endearing. And this is one in the winter. Their hair, fur, whatever you want to call it, is one of the finest fibers in the world. It's very strong. It's very long. It's soft as down. And if you can get it, you can make some absolutely beautiful things out of their hair. This is one who's shedding the winter and getting into the summer fuzz along the way. And these guys, the Arctic hare, the rabbit, the bunny, the Leptis arcticus, he's in his winter guise at the moment. He will turn mottled color, brown and so forth soon, like these guys. And these are kits or little foxes. And they're one of the 7 mammals that live in Greenland. Neither one of those, the hares are very common. They hunt them for food and whatever, not in the cities and not in the big towns, but mostly in the scattered places around. And nobody hunts these guys. They're mostly way up beyond the places where people travel. And then the old venerable walrus. There were a lot of these up until the 14th, 15th, 16th century. And then the Norse arrived and they started culling them, if you will. They just killed them in massive numbers to the point where they brought them right to extinction. But by the 17th century, somebody had moved into Africa and discovered elephants. And it was a whole lot easier to shoot an elephant and come up with, I don't know, 50, 100, 200 pounds of ivory instead of trying to hunt down one of these guys for just one little old tooth, at the same time. That's what they used them for. They cut the tusks out and sent them back to Europe, and they carved them. That was what they were good for. Well, of course, the Inuits objected, but it didn't do any good. Then the Norse left. In the 17th century, they just picked up and went back, probably to Africa, in order to find the elephants. And the walrus recovered. Worldwide, walruses are still rare. They're not something that's common at all. This is an ancient one. This is in a museum. It's a world-class museum in Ilulissat that was built under the guise of the United Nations. It is a magnificent modern building. I'll show you a little more about it later. Ptarmigans are, walk out and club one in the head and you'll be happy. They're everywhere. They're hunted even today by people from the towns and the cities that go out and shoot them for food. They are not threatened. Sometimes you find 300 of them together in one place. This is in their winter garb too. They also, like the kits and the other animals, the hares, they turn mottled brown if you've ever seen one in the summer. This is one of the best pictures I've ever seen of a breaching whale. And humpbacks, I've seen 80 of them at a time. This is supposed to be, according to the woman on the ship that I was on in Antarctica, the largest concentration of humpbacks she'd ever seen in her life was this one afternoon before we left Antarctica. Now, these same humpbacks go from Antarctica all the way up to the Arctic. in a year. Pretty darned amazing. This is one in Disco Bay in Greenland. And it is, again, as a photographer, it's magnificent. Humpbacks are very, very common. There's an awful lot of them in the world. This is a minke. Minkies, as you see, there's no teeth. They're not the kind that are toothed whales. They actually have the baleen, which filters their food, which is very small through those. But the color of this thing, and this again was in Disco Bay, is magnificent. These guys, if you've ever heard of caribou or you've heard of reindeer, then you've heard of the same thing. They are interchangeable, the name is, but it's the very same kind of ungulate, no matter where you go in the world, whether it's Russia calling it one thing in Greenland and Canada and Alaska, you get the idea. They just pick up on them. The flora, I was amazed. Over 2,000 species of flowers, mosses, lichens, and fungi. This was my find. When I went walking one day after I'd been there for about 2 weeks, and I was in Kangerlussuaq, which is an old Air Force base where they bring in international flights and whatever. There's only 300 people there. And I wandered off one day and I found a mushroom. And I thought I discovered something that nobody else had seen. No. As it turned out, there's 700 varieties, just varieties of fungi in Greenland. Again, it's low living. That's very important. Nothing grows very high, not much higher than a bush. Like trees are non-existent at the same time, but they do like fungi. This is a 50-year-old tree that was transplanted from Europe. Now, 50 years, if you live in the northern countries, you're regrowing New Hampshire, I understand. But if you're out in Canada or you're out somewhere in the Olympic Peninsula, 50 years is only 20 or 30 years away from being cut down for lumber. I think he's got a ways to go. This tree is probably 25 feet tall and still a Christmas tree. Even it was just an experiment. That's what is, and they're not ready for pine forest yet. This is Arctic willow. And yes, it's only this tall. It's a runner that goes along the ground. When it really grows up, it's about 3 feet high as a bush. And that's as close to a tree as they have. And these primroses is the state or the national flower in Greenland. And this is their favorite color. And they do the strange thing, flowers there as opposed to Iceland. I've been through the middle of Iceland and seen strawberry plants that are 3.5 inches tall. These things can go 3 feet high, just as flowers. So it does depend, I guess, on whether you're perennial or you're annual. And this bog Labrador, they've been using this to make medicinal tea forever, as long as there have been people on Greenland. And a couple of places in the whole country, you can actually find a valley somewhere that is covered with flowers. It is unusual, but it does occur. And then bluebells. Who hasn't seen one of those? If you've been to 6 continents, not Antarctica, you've seen bluebells. Well, they're in Greenland too, along with everybody else. Now, this is just some of what I was able to get. The colors and textures of mosses, lichens, and fungi. Like we said, there's 750 varieties just of these low-lying plants, or Monera, or whatever they're calling them this week, but basically a variety of plant. And this is what they grow in, granite, because the whole country is anchored in granite. That's part of its tectonic plate. As you travel there, like I did, you stay in hostels and whatever, because you never have enough money to stay where the other people stay, in motels. And I loved it because I wound up spending a lot of time with these young folks who are there studying. These are dirt people, as they call themselves. They study soils. And so this young couple was just marvelous from Switzerland. Another couple that I ran into were Germans in the same way. And this pair went to the southern part of, they were on vacation in Disco Bay. And so they wound up going down to the southern part to both study soils and to teach the Icelandic kids, or Iceland, did I say that? The Greenlandic kids in that part of the country. So it had a double meaning. If you want to see these things, two things have to happen. You have to have excitement going on the sun's surface, and then you have to be here when there's no clouds. And if those two things conspire, you see some of the most incredible northern lights that you can anywhere. You may have seen some of these here in New Hampshire, I understand. We actually see some in northern Arizona, if you can imagine that. Not like that. Modern Greenland. This is the part that most people don't realize, that there is a growing country of people, and Nuuk, which is the capital, is a very modern city that you would think was just transplanted from Europe. And we'll let you take a look at it.
Nuuk, Greenland's capital and largest city, is located on the southwestern coast and is home to around 19,000 residents, roughly 1/3 of Greenland's total population. It enjoys a unique geographical setting, surrounded by the sea on 3 sides and backed by majestic mountains. The polar atmosphere blends with oceanic breezes, offering surprisingly mild temperatures for its northern location. Summer temperatures rarely exceed 10 degrees Celsius, while winter lows seldom drop below -10 degrees Celsius, thanks to the influence of the warm Atlantic current. Founded in 1728 by Danish missionary Hans Egede, Nuuk has evolved from a small trading post into a bustling city and the centre of Greenlandic life. Despite its Arctic setting, it is a vibrant modern city, brimming with amenities such as hospitals, schools, and museums.
Building in the middle of that picture is the university.
Greenland's political, cultural, and educational hub, deeply rooted in Inuit culture and contemporary art. The colourful houses scattered across the snow-covered land brighten up the city during long winters, adding warmth to the landscape.
I mentioned that one building, that's the University of Greenland. And yes, they do have a university. I've been there and they're studying madly all of the different aspects of their own environment in the ocean, under the ocean, on top of the ice sheet, everything. It's a fascinating place, and it's part of a group of universities, both in Greenland and Iceland, Norway and Sweden, and Canada and the United States and Alaska. And they all combine their resources and their information. It is amazing, the energy that goes on among all these. But Greenland holds the key to the whole thing in many respects because of its change and its dynamism, I guess, in the Arctic itself. These are walk around. These are pictures that I took when I was there. This is a modern apartment block. It's, I think we figured 13 stories tall or whatever. It's like the houses that were built in the early 20th century with all those colors, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. They're still using primary colors because in the winter, you know about white, except you all paint your houses white. What is the color? Anyway, over there, they paint them multiple colors. So they show up in the winter, you know, at the same time. And even these, if you were to go into these, they're probably 5 or 8 years old, you would see just what you'd see in Copenhagen. These are modern European places, and who knew, you know? I was just talking to young ladies here. This city has a population of 21,000. Nuuk has a population just shy of 20. So you have an idea, actually, the comparison between the two in size. This is the mall. There is a mall in downtown Nuuk at the same time. One of the fascinating things is this store that you see here with flowers, the florist, all those were grown in Greenland. This is new. It's not going to contribute to the exportation or whatever of anything, but locally, this is absolutely amazing what they've been doing. This is another niche where they've been growing plants and so forth, and then they sell them in the mall. This is the post office, the central post office, just the end of that brown building. What you see to the right is a major boulevard, and then to the left is a walkway that goes down through buildings. Need I say more? This is in downtown Nuuk. It's again, there's nothing more modern than what's going on in Nuuk. Side story here. When I've traveled around the world, I have always traveled since I was 16, 17, 18 years old with one intention. And that is whenever I take pictures of people, I always ask for permission. This is one of the things that I absolutely cannot. It's my ethic, okay, at the same time. Sometimes they say no, but I'm telling you, if you ask permission, 98% of the people that you ask will say yes, okay? That's not my reason for doing it. It's because I respect people. So I was walking down that long place I showed you on the left-hand side, and I see these two little kids playing on the sculpture. And I thought that would make a dandy picture. But the mother outside this picture was standing there. And I went over to the mother and said, would you mind if I take a picture of your kids? And she said, no, ask the kids. So I did. I walked over and I asked the two little girls. She didn't give them a signal or whatever. I just said, could I take your picture? Sure. So I took the picture and went on. But that's the way to travel in Africa or wherever you happen to be, is just be respectful of other people and you bond immediately with them. A Kiki is one of 3 or 4 grocery chains. And when you go in these stores, this is high-end groceries. No offense, we have the same thing in Arizona. There's, levels of grocery stores. This is better than what we have. I kid you not. Everything is imported, 95, 98% of it. Only the whale skin and some of the other things in the frozen food department I wouldn't eat on a bet. At the same time that are traditional, all of this comes from Europe. It costs more money, but it is wonderful, wonderful stuff. And so a Kiki is one of those that you go along. This is part of the traditional buildup that they had. This is probably 120, 125 years old. It's a school, and it still operates as such. I took pictures from over here to the right a couple times on other days, and there were actually icebergs up on the shore before the school. So again, it's a little different. Notice the bikes. This is people that unless it's really, really snowy and they can't get around, a lot of people bike around Nuuk. And this isn't guests. These are people who live in those apartment blocks. A Jagak is actually where they make those tupalaks today. There's only a couple of places left that do that. And this young lady here is the one that made the one that I bought. It was really kind of fun to talk to the person who was the handicrafter at the same time. Just one slip of a file and you zip off a finger and you have to throw the thing away. They are very, very good at what they do. And these are some of the, look at the teeth on those things. And they do use Dremels, if you know what a Dremel is, but most of the stuff is just hand filed at the same time. Marvelous. People are pretty much equal in the afterlife. Well, I don't know about that, but at least at the end of life, at the same time, you will see in different parts of Nuuk and in other towns like Ilulissat, 99% of everyone who passes away, whether they're Danish and they're not sent back to Denmark necessarily, or they're Inuit, all have a plot like this with a white wooden cross. It's not good or bad, it just is, at the same time. If somebody was really unusual, you'll see the black headstone there, that's as big as it gets. Nobody has a big monument, there's nothing like that. And they can't start a cemetery just anywhere. As you can imagine, when the whole place is built on granite, you have to look for till or for some softer ground. But it can't be so deep that it has permafrost, because if it does, I just heard this from this same couple that happened to be in, what the heck, it wasn't Iceland. It's not Nunavut. Trying to think of the other place, Svalbard. They can't bury anybody because when you do in permafrost, eventually they come back to say hello. So that doesn't work. So what they wind up doing here is they don't have this recurring thing with people. This is what you'll see. It's just unique. I've never quite seen that in other cultures. Houses and colors. Back in the day, and this was perhaps 75 years ago, and maybe even more than that, 100 years ago, the houses were painted a color code so that if you were looking for an administrative office, it might be yellow. And if you went through a village and whatever and you saw blue, it might be some kind of an administrative center. And if it was red, then it might be a school. But over time, they didn't need that anymore, and all those things became more obvious. So now today you can paint them any color you want, and they still love those primary colors. Like I said, if you go there, you can, in the winter in particular, it isn't just the white snow, it's the very dark sky. So you want anything that will lighten the place up, and they still do it. Now, I like this picture because along the top of it, you see more modern apartment blocks. These might be 50 years old or 60 years old. They're not contemporary yet at that point, and they still use the same primary colors. It's marvelous to see and to photograph at the same time. This is another picture in the mall. The reason I bring it up is because I had several people look at this and they wondered on the left-hand side, are those military? No, they're trophy hunters, probably from Alabama. Okay, a lot of Americans go up there to shoot caribou and that wily goat that we talked about before, the muskox. And then they take home the horns and all the rest of that stuff and then give the meat to the local market. But this is so typical. There is absolutely nobody, what's with this thing? There is absolutely nobody in all of Greenland that wears a uniform. They have no military of any kind. Okay, so if you see somebody like that, they're probably hunters. And then the rest of these folks are just locals, and people like me that are just dropping in because they're tourists. You ever seen any picture like that before? And that ain't photoshopped. That's the real thing. In Nuuk, they are fanatical all over Greenland about soccer or football, as they call it. But I have never seen a pitch with icebergs floating by right next to it. Not in Iceland, not anywhere in the world. It is pretty wild. There are about 57,000 people in all of Greenland. 5,500 of them are active soccer players, not people who go to watch the game, people who participate. 1/10 of the population plays soccer. They are bananas about it compared to Europeans or anybody else at the same time. The reason they're not acknowledged in the world is they don't have a stadium, even in Nuuk. Everybody has to scatter on kind of a natural stadium up there on the side. It's a little coarse, but by golly, it works. And so they cover the side of these mountains. And then there's a parking lot in Nuuk around the national field, not the one with the icebergs, at the same time. And when their team scores, everybody honks their horn. That's their way of celebrating if you're sitting in a warm car while this is going on. And this is what they'll do. I mean, they'll even clear a place out in the bush, and they'll put up a pitch somewhere to play soccer. I didn't even really realize that till I got back, but it is a fascinating side story of what happens there. Now we're getting a little closer to commerce and what actually does and doesn't work in Greenland. I talked to somebody, I don't think it was today, that had been there and had done an expedition along the East Coast. I think it was in Sandown at the same time. The thing you have to remember in a place like this is these are not Caribbean style floating cities. They can't because they have to go in and out of icebergs in at least part of what they do. These ships typically don't land. They go around the contours of the country and they leave. So 95% of all the money that's paid in to these cruise ship companies stays with the cruise ship company, sometimes 100% of it. They don't even stop for lunch in a town or city. That kind of grates as you can imagine, with the Greenlanders. They don't leave anything behind except dirty water. Okay, and so this is one of the things they're trying to figure out for the future. What do we do in order to encourage the people to travel and so forth without losing everything in the bargain? And they don't, again, use really big ships. These are another part of the taxi, the local tourism. People that show up there, sometimes they go from one part of Nuuk to another. A lot of times tourists will jump on these things and say, we saw an iceberg floating by, can you get it to us? And they'll take them 5 miles out into the harbor. And yes, they get close-ups of an iceberg floating by. So, but these yellow taxis are quite common around Nuuk. I was on a boat a little bit bigger than this, and this is 90% of all the tourists who go to Greenland who actually aren't on a cruise ship, okay? They're on land, and then they go to these various towns and so forth, and they go out on 8 to 16 passenger boats, 90% of them. And that's how they, again, they can maneuver among the icebergs and whatever and go wherever they want. That's a future. This is the ultimate flyover. There's only one company I know that does this, and it's called Air Zambia, I think, or something similar to that. They have 5 passenger planes, and they go up and fly over both the ice sheet and in Disco Bay, where all those icebergs are and whatever. It's magnificent. I had 2 reservations, and both of them were canceled because it was overcast and you couldn't see anything. So I didn't get to go up, but I still go and stay in touch with them and hope to do that next summer when I'm there. This is an internationally designed museum, a living museum, if you will. It's part of that United Nations World Heritage Site with all of the icebergs and so forth. You can walk right across the roof of it, because when you're up there, you really can look forever out into the icebergs in Ilulissat. And this is part of the museum, the way they build these acrylic things that make you think of ice, and then they put something inside them, like this 4,600-year-old piece of driftwood. Who cares? But at the time, if you can find something up on an ice sheet, it's really a big deal. So it's probably found its way there. It had to have found its way there with the Inuits that were living in that part of the country. And so they put that in there, or I showed you the tusk of the walrus, the same kind of thing. This is unique. These are ice cores. This is actually a freezer, the front, the top part of it. So they take these ice cores and then they take pictures of them to show you what's in the ice with a black background. And they're in different ages and so forth, but this was my favorite at 124,000-year-old ice core. Now, remember what I said, the last time this place didn't have ice was 410,000 years ago. So you can find an ice core much older than this if you're willing to dig deep enough at the same time. Oh, food. I don't take pictures of food, or me for that matter, except in this case, this is the fare you get at a motel in Ilulissat, coming or going from the tour that you had in those little boats. It looks like something you were served somewhere in a fine restaurant in Europe. It is that good. This is just halibut, okay? But it was probably caught within 5 miles of that table. But when they prepare it, it's the same thing that you find in almost any kind of cafe or restaurant in Nuuk or Ilulissat or Sisimiut or any of those other towns. It is beautiful, and they take pride in what they're doing at the same time. So I had to. Pacific is another grocery store like the Kiki that I saw before, but I have to show people going into it because this comes after that. This is when you go in the mall, if you can imagine. You're walking down the mall and you just got in there and you look to the right, that's what you see. And they have 3 people that are willing to take your money in order to fix you up. So they always fix me up because I can't go past one of these things if I had to. And it's all the ingredients are shipped there. And then they make these in Greenland. at the same time. This stuff, I kid you not, compares to anything you can find on the Champs-Élysées in France. It's that good. Again, it's a pride thing. They really do care about that. This is the library. It's the only one of significance in Nuuk so far, but it is a fairly new idea. Okay, and they're like here, they're building brand new ones as we speak. And so that will be part of the future. By the way, do you know what the literacy rate is in the United States? No, not in your town. I'm talking about, generally speaking. Do you know? Have you ever read it or seen it anywhere? Yeah, well, actually, I've read it at 82. So it's about 82% literacy. And again, it depends on who's doing the statistics, but it's 100% in Greenland. They absolutely are married to the idea of being readers and being able to understand what is going on. Now, it's a small country, and we're a very big one with a lot of diversity and all the, did I use that word? A lot of diversity in the people and whatever in places, but it does say something. I will throw this in too. When I was in Gaza 30 years ago, it was 100% in Gaza. When people, even then, were really living in pretty destitute situations. There's just certain, and again, this is a smaller group of people. You have to understand that, but it's a priority. Oh, did I mention this is another place I like to go? It's the Cafe Piscucci, or Piscucci, as it were. Again, look at this is just another place to drop into in Nuuk at the same time. And that's my table. They put my name next to no, they didn't do that. Next to the two. This is an incinerator. It's, again, it's the newest and biggest one probably in all of Greenland. Now, what do you do when you live on a rock? And the only thing that you can do, everybody's producing refuse and all the rest of that stuff. If you haul it out of town, unless you blast a huge hole in the granite, all you can do is put it on top of the granite, or maybe you find a swale somewhere. But eventually, it's going to be bigger than the swale, and there's no dirt to cover it up. And so what does it do? It blows around because it doesn't rot. It's too cold. And so a long, long time ago, 100 years ago, they started building these incinerators, and every town and city has one or two or three or five, whatever. This one is now producing heat, and the heat is actually, during the winter in particular, is shipped out to some of those apartment blocks that you saw, those more modern ones. That's the best they can do, because it's just a problem that won't go away, and it doesn't have many solutions. And since I love garbage, it's not just a food thing. I came over here to Ilulissat in a smaller town, and I wanted to see what they did. They separate everything. It's all recyclables and things that they can't burn. And then this is what's left, is the refuse and the garbage and so forth, with a big old clump. They go down and get it and feed it in a hopper, and down it goes into the burner and up the stack. This is probably one of the most important things that you all need to know about and pass on to anyone else who might be interested in Greenland. Its current and future economy. There are real prospects for the economy of Greenland, some based on established products and services, as well as new and emerging ones. And then there are some that aren't. I don't know if you've ever seen this picture. It's been bandied about in the last 6 months or so. Those are not mines. Those are core samples. There are only 2 mines in all of Greenland, this huge place, 2 working mines. They know that there's a considerable amount of minerals and metals and whatever there, but they're all undeveloped. And how long does it take to develop from a core sample to a paying mine? Well, I actually read a couple of articles by the Ministry of Mining in Greenland, 9 to 16 years. It isn't a snatch and grab. It isn't something that you go in and say, we're going to take this particular substance, whatever it is, and resell it and do whatever. Can't do it. It's just not possible to do it. But these folks live there, and they're going to be doing it over time, because it's really good information, actually, to have these core samples. Now they have to go through the process of developing mines. Rare earths. You had to have heard of rare earths in the last year. This is maybe one of the most illuminating of all of the slides that I put up here anyway. This is reserves. It's not those things that, it's not the rare earths that are actually being processed today. Yes, China is the largest one, 90% or whatever of all rare earths today that are being processed in China. But as a reserve at the same time, China has about half of the world's known reserves. Okay, fine. So we know that. The next one is Brazil. And these are in millions of tons, by the way. Brazil is the next one. After that is India and Australia and Russia. Vietnam has twice as much. You know how the size, relative speaking, of Vietnam compared to the United States? Okay, so they have more or less twice as much as we do. Where's Greenland? It's tiny. And those are the ones that we've been arguing over that are so important at the same time. Only Tanzania and Zambia have less than Greenland does. Now, of all of these places, with the exception of maybe Russia, it is so much easier to mine this stuff when it's warm and they have access and oceans, whether it's Vietnam or India or Brazil, than it is to go to the edge of the earth where it's frozen, it's dark, you have to haul in everything. Why would you do that? I mean, seriously. So, but this is the statistic that really puts a question mark next to what we are planning or not planning to do, and that turnaround time of 9 to 16 years. This is a mine that isn't working. This is in Greenland that was, I think it's a bauxite mine, or it's related to aluminum. For 120 years or whatever, somebody from Europe, I think it was probably the Danes, were taking ore out of that pit. When I looked at it, the first thing I said is, how deep do you have to go before it caves in? With the ocean being right next to the thing. But apparently it didn't. So that's a good thing. That's what granite's for. This is one of the two working mines today, the northesite. And this particular mine has 250 guys, they're all men, that work in this mine. They're brought in from the outside. They live in a dorm, which is pleasant, but oh my goodness, I cannot imagine 6 months of darkness much of the time and all the rest of that where they are. And they have to go all the way up and come all the way back down again but it is paying, this particular one is. The other's a gold mine. And the gold mine is way up in the southern part of the country again, it's kind of a fjord to get there. And you have to go 30 minutes into a mountain to get to where they're mining the gold. However, at $5,000 an ounce, it's paying out very nicely. It's been there for 16, 18 years. And so that's the other one that is working. The other wonderful thing is they don't have to do this anymore. This is oil, okay? And what they've been doing is heating from far-flung communities way out 1,000 miles, 500 miles from towns. They have had to bring in oil in order to heat the buildings in these small communities. They've consolidated a lot of those communities, but the good thing is they don't have to do this anymore because they discovered this. And this is hydroelectric, and this is the energy of the future for Greenland. Why? It's the largest place on Earth for hydroelectric production. And now by 2030, the entire country will be working off hydroelectric produced electricity and then heat because of it and all the rest of that. It's only 3 years away. They're almost there now out of all the major towns and the city. And that is only about 20 of the 60 sites in the country that have been identified as potentials for hydroelectric production. The other 40 sites are up for what could we do with them at the same time, compared to everything that we even do. With green energy and all the rest of this, there's nothing cheaper than hydroelectric, and it's constant. That's one of the beauties of it. So that adds a great deal to the future. This is the plant that feeds Nuuk. This has been enlarged several times, and is now peaked out at what they need. Another area of the future, especially for industry and so forth, is fishing. They've been doing it for 4,500 years. It's gotten to a point where 90% of their export is fish, but it's not enough. I mean, it doesn't produce enough income worldwide to do that. This is maybe one of the biggest surprises for you. This is a socialist country. It's the most successful socialist country in the world, but again, like we talked about before, it's small. And so the people agree on what they want to do. Yeah, they argue, they do whatever, but in the end, they decide what they want to do for the future because they have a relatively small population. They have decided in almost all industries that they are going to share. They're going to share both what they can do as a country and in private enterprise. So fishing is an example. Half of all the fishing that's done is done with industrial trawlers like this. It's set at 50%. The other 50% is these guys. These are independent fishermen. You can do it today or you can forget about it and do it next week. But all these boats, there's some 4,000 of them in Greenland, are all privately held. And 50% of all the fish that's caught is caught by individuals. This is the way it goes for shipping and the electric production. Everything is shared between the country and individuals. It's a marvelous system that only works because you got 57,000 people that eventually agree on what they want to do. Uh-oh, where'd this come from? This was another place where I happened to get dessert. And again, it's just beautiful. I like to keep looking at it anyway. And here, this is a big tour boat. Tourism is, like I told you before, is a great prospect for the future, especially if it's done on land. If it's done with cruise ships, it's going to be a problem down the way. This is Gangersluisuk. This was an Air Force base that was built by us in 1942 to shuttle planes from North America to Europe. And they would land on this one strip that's ideal. It hardly gets any snow. There's hardly any wind. It's just terrific. We abandoned it permanently in 1996 and turned it over to both Denmark and to Greenland. And until 2 years ago, it was the only place you could land an international flight in all of Greenland, not even Nuuk. But now Nuuk, I was there 2 months after they opened the first international airport. Now they have one that opens this year in Ilulissat, and there's going to be one in the southern part, and this place will be pretty much shuttered, even by the locals. And this is how far it is. It's 5 hours to Moscow and 4 hours to New York, so I guess you're more or less in between somewhere. This is the only ferry that runs down the west coast of the country. It starts at the very bottom where Eric the Red said, hey, this is Greenland, all the way up to Disco Bay. I don't know what the distance is, 800 miles or something, turns around and then goes back again as long as there's no ice. So it's about 7 months of the year, and it's a marvel. This is what I told you is at the bottom of the sea. This is benthic, what they call benthic development at the bottom of the sea. Interestingly enough, Greenland, again, with its own parliament and its own people, got together with Norway, and Norway was saying, look, if we start dredging the bottom of the ocean ignorantly, we don't know what's going on there and all the rest of this, what are we doing to the sea? And so they said, we have a moratorium on dredging the bottom of the sea until we know more about it. And then there's bald spots in the sea and whatever, where are they? Rather than just dropping a scoop down there and tearing this stuff up and messing up the water column along the way, why don't we be smart about it? And so they put between Greenland and Norway, it's a lot of Arctic Ocean, all of that is off limits for anybody to dredge. Eventually we may do it, but for now they were smart. And this is typical of what they're doing scientifically. It's another picture of life at 2,000 feet or whatever below the sea. Because I can't get enough of those. It's another one of mine. and here. If you go there and you're lucky, you will see some of the most spectacular auroras anywhere in the world. One thing to remember, if you're celebrating the winter solstice, probably don't want to do it in Nuuk. Why? Because it never gets light. It's above the Arctic Circle, and you might see a little glimmer for 2 hours of the day, but the other 22 is going to be nighttime. And it does put off a lot of people from the rest of the world. Even I've seen a lot of American youth that have been over there doing research and whatever, a year or 2 years, and they got to go back to Florida somewhere in order to discover the sun again. It is a very difficult thing, but it's what they've been doing for all this time, for 4,000 years. That's a little bit photoshopped, not by me because I don't own one, but this is pretty much what it looks like on the southeast coast of Greenland. And that's a prize-winning National Geographic shot I wish I had taken, but I didn't see it, so it doesn't matter. These folks, the one on the right again, is probably been passed down by a couple of generations. Not everybody can expend a couple years making a dress like that. That's one of the reasons that the Inuit are so proud of their past and so forth. The other folks and all these people in this family are probably going to a gathering today. This is contemporary with family members and so forth. This is what they might wear at the same time. Now these, again, I need to emphasize this because this is really why we're here today, ultimately, is where we're going to be tomorrow. Fishing, I already told you, it produces 90% of exports, but it has absolutely no possibility to bring in enough income for the future for the country. Tourism, it's controversial in the sense they need to sort out how they're going to do it. Now with 3 international airports, I think that, and things are not good right now, especially with Americans, because we aren't welcome there, as you can imagine. It's going to be tough in 2026, but eventually tourism will add a great deal to their economy. Mining, over time, will help. In 10 years, 15 years, it will probably produce a significant part of their income, but not next week, and not next year. Green energy. There is this largest hydroelectric capacity, and one of the things that I never heard of is green hydrogen. Now, green hydrogen, you have to look it up. It's kind of needs a lot of explanation. Essentially, if you produce hydrogen packets, if you will, okay, you can power anything, cars and whatever about it. The reason it hasn't taken off, in part, is because it takes as much energy to produce green hydrogen as you get out of the hydrogen, unless you have hydroelectric production. And with hydroelectric, which is virtually free, the way they got it here, this has a tremendous potential for future. It's exportable. It's kind of like liquid propane or liquid natural gas, LNG types of things. I think, in my opinion, and I've worked with a lot of peoples around the world, and the characteristic of the folks there, entrepreneurial development is one of their absolute best prospects for the future. The people of Greenland have a history of individual economies. That's what they are. I mean, the little villages, the towns, and whatever, whether we're fishing or making duplex or whatever it turned out to be, they are more like us in the United States, where that's our heritage, where we would have small businesses at the same time and still retain that desire. And what about the highly skilled tactile employment, like the Mississippi Band of Choctaw? I will tell you a second about that. With their industrial success, it has great potential home industry, long nights of small industrial center employment as well, and it's worth considering. I haven't talked to anybody in ministry yet, and they haven't asked my opinion. But if they did, that's probably what I would say. Okay, one quick story on the Choctaw. In my wanderings around the US, when I was talking about economic development among Native American peoples, I ran across this group of folks in Mississippi, 8,500 acre reservation. It was small, and it was like most reservations, to be honest with you, before gambling came along, they had nothing. It was really destitute. But the guy who came back from the Air Force, he was a member of the tribe, He'd been a captain or he was an officer. He came back and he was really bummed out by the fact that the people weren't dancing in any particular way. So he got together with them and said, what can we do? And they said, well, what do you think? And he said, what if we built 4 pads for small industrial complex type things, parking lots and lighting. And then we went out to the world and said, here we are. By the way, and this, again, it's not racial, but it is sort of, I guess. Native American peoples typically have smaller hands. It's a tactile thing. They are very good. I know because I worked with Navajos for a very long time too. And so they're very good with doing things that require that kind of manipulation. So he wrote 500 letters to the Fortune 500 companies and got nowhere. Nobody responded. So the next year he did the same thing. Nothing. And in the 3rd year, GM said, hey, let's talk. And so GM came to them and they got together and said, look, we've got a place for you. What can we do? And the chairman of the board of GM said, what about making wiring harnesses? Because it's one of those things where you have to string out the wires and do all the rest of this stuff. And he said, yes, that sounds like ideal. They gave him a contract for 3 years. The bank let them build a building. And 15 years later, they were still doing the same thing. The next year, he did the same thing with 499 letters. And Hallmark came to him and said, we see what you're doing tactily and all the rest of this. What about doing pop-up cards? Because they're actually handmade. And they said, wonderful, build another one of these particular plants on the reservation. And they were successful. Before you knew it, within 5 years, they had built 4 of these for different companies, had 0 unemployment, and were hiring non-natives, which was kind of cool. And then they built another industrial park in Gulfport, Mississippi, and hired non-Indians to work in it, even though they owned it. It's a rare success, but it is what can be done when you think through the process. And I just admired the heck out of this guy. I was lucky enough to meet him over the years and hear the story of what they did. I see the potential, it was just me, of that kind of thing working in Greenland, where independent people or small companies are able to do something that you can't do in India or China or wherever because of circumstance or contracts or whatever. So that's just one of the building pieces, I think, for the future. Now, these 3 things have to be said. You get to today, we all are Americans. I said we all are. That's okay too. At the same time, what about how they feel from their perspective about the world? This isn't me and it isn't you, and it's not Washington. This is these folks and the way they look out into the world and see it. I had a video I was going to show, but it was pretty strong, even though it's from them. But this I have to do. So this is from Denmark's Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, in about the middle of January of this year. I would like to take this opportunity to send a message directly to the United States of America, says she. This is not only about Greenland or Denmark. This is about the world order that we have built together across the Atlantic over generations. You cannot annex another country, not even with an argument about security, she said. And then this one is the Prime Minister of Greenland. We need cooperation and partnerships with like-minded countries and institutions who share our values. The EU has been a stable, reliable, and important partner for Greenland for more than 40 years. So he said in France. He extended a heartfelt thank you to the EU for your strong support for Greenland during challenging times we are going through right now. You have stood by us as a friend and partner. We will never forget this. Just one more quote. This is from a retired member of the parliament in Denmark, but he had an incredible importance along the way. We have an agreement with our Greenland fellow citizens that they decide their future in freedom based on their own assessments and their own will. For us, it's a violation of everything we stand for and everything we have agreed with the Greenlanders, if that decision is not taken in freedom and without coercion. Okay, again, their words. Two things that I brought back with me. I probably took 20 taxi rides while I was there because renting cars is kind of futile in a country with no roads, just the cities and towns, and that's it. Okay, I talked to a lot of young people, and this was last August. And probably with two exceptions, out of all those people, the one word that they always mentioned somewhere along the way quietly was fear. Now, you saw Nuke. Nuke is just laid out there along the coast of Greenland. There isn't a person in uniform. They are plucked, ready to be plucked, if that's what happens. They have no defense. But one of the things that I was intrigued by one of the people in the ministry that I talked to is, this is our country. We will be here long after you leave. We will not cooperate with you. We will not help you take our country, but we're not going to resist. We will be here when you leave. And I thought, wow, that says it kind of all. And that's what I leave you with as far as their feelings go. You have to figure out how you feel about it and how you see it along the way. And then I have this last.
Further east, Northeast Greenland National Park, the largest national park in the world, spans nearly 1 million square kilometres of untouched wilderness. Its extreme climate and isolation make it a crucial site for scientific research and a magnet for adventure tourism. Here, glaciers carve through rugged mountains, deep fjords stretch for miles, and the icy terrain tells the story of a changing Arctic. Scientists study the region to track glacial retreat and its impact on rising sea levels, while explorers venture into its vast, untamed expanse for a once-in-a-lifetime Arctic experience. And that's Greenland, a place unlike anywhere else on Earth. With its endless ice fields, towering icebergs, rugged fjords, and rich Inuit culture, I hope the world's largest island has now found its way onto your travel bucket list, if not your next destination. But the real question is, if Greenland were ever up for sale, what price could possibly justify buying a place this epic? Discover the world, explore the extraordinary. See you in the next adventure.
Okay, this is us. If you haven't written it down yet, maybe you will. We are this nonprofit that is simply called the Greenland Advocate, because that's what we're doing. We're advocating for Greenland, not just politically, not particularly politically, but we want people to know what the place is like. So if you can pass this on, you can always go to our website, like I said, which is constantly growing. Up in the toolbar at the top, you'll see resources and media and tours, news. All these things are directly connected to other tour companies, science companies, everybody, even in the government. And that's what we keep adding as we go along. And one of the things I do want to let you know is that we've gotten about as far as we can go by self-funding. And we are looking for money, in small amounts of money, even sponsors that are interested in promoting what we're promoting, which is an understanding of this great place. It may not be you, you may know somebody or an organization that would like to do that. We'd love to hear from them, because this is going to guarantee that we can continue doing what we're doing. But all in all, greenlandadvocate.com is us, and that's what we're about. Thank you so much for showing up this evening and staying long. There are a couple of books, and there's some business cards over there on your way out if you'd like to just take a look at what's available. Thank you so much. Oh, you're very welcome. My pleasure. Sure.
Ship up back to.
Most of the ones that get burned. Yeah, the plastic. Yeah, they don't really have a way. The things that don't are metallic and, the other heavy stuff that goes along with it.
So everything gets shipped in, all food and all that kind of stuff.
And if it comes in reusable containers, it goes back, at the same time. That's a good question.
I have one more question.
Sure.
So the young people who grow up there, do they tend to stay?
More and more no. Because the opportunities, again, they have an unemployment rate of about 10%, somewhere in that neighborhood. And younger people have seen what's back in Gay Paris, and so they're ready to go back to Copenhagen or whatever. And until they develop a working economy, it's going to be touch and go for the people. Well, yeah, that's why they're working in that direction. Healthcare is excellent. Healthcare is as good, even though somebody sent a good ship Hope up there, he never did. But he said he was going to. It wound up going through the Panama Canal somewhere off to Asia when it was supposed to be on its way to Greenland. They have the same level of medical care that you have in Denmark or France or any place else. It's free and it's excellent. One strange thing, when after that announcement of the good ship Hope sending up there, we had an American submarine. No kidding. 48 hours later, they had been cruising off the coast, and they had a crew member that was apparently very, very ill. So they came to the surface and called Nuke, and Nuke flew a helicopter over, picked up the guy, and took him to a hospital in Nuke. And then we didn't hear any more about the good ship Hope, wound up somewhere else. It's just unfortunate. Yes. Well, yeah, and the cooperation with Greenland, at the same time. Yes, you bet.
Really quick question. You kept mentioning the Navajo Nation. I was up there. I taught there for 7 years.
Did you really?
Yeah.
What town or what?
Red Valley.
Okay.
Red Valley Folk Chapter.
Okay.
It was up in the Four Corners,
Mhm.
40 miles south, Arizona. And so I was up, like I said, I was up there for 7 years. Where were you?
I was in Ganado.
Oh, I know a good.
Yeah. It's 30 miles west of Window Rock.
Yeah.
And I spent almost all my time right there because I worked for the community. They had grants and whatever, and I was the only non-native.
Yeah, there's a
It was
big
on-
clinic.
Yes, there is
In the
now.
Ganado
in
Trade.
particular. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Historic national.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I know the area well.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I don't run across many folks. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I
Yeah.
actually had the same question because I knew someone who worked for the Navajo Nation. His name was Stanley Pollock. He's an attorney who did water rights.
Oh, really?
Okay.
I think